Hi, I'm Natalie, and last Christmas morning, my parents threw my belongings into garbage bags and told me I had 30 minutes to disappear from their lives forever. What they didn't know was that I'd been secretly building a real estate portfolio for 3 years. By February, I owned their mortgage. By March, I held their financial future in my hands. And when they came crawling back, begging for mercy, I had a choice to make that would define who I really was. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The snow was falling thick that Christmas morning in Portland, the kind that makes the Hawthorne district look like a postcard. Every house on Maple Ridge glowed with warm yellow lights, wreaths hanging perfectly on front doors, and the smell of cinnamon and pine drifting through the crisp air. I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 9 a.m., just like we'd planned. I'd driven through the empty streets feeling grateful, carrying a bag full of carefully wrapped presents and a homemade coffee cake that had taken me 3 hours to perfect the night before. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Zoe. "Hope the family drama stays minimal today. Call me if you need an escape route." I smiled and typed back, "It's Christmas. Even my parents can't ruin Christmas." How wrong I was. The front door was unlocked, which seemed strange, but I pushed it open and called out, "Merry Christmas! I brought coffee cake." The house felt different immediately, too quiet, no music playing, no sounds of breakfast being prepared, no excited chatter about presents. Just an odd, heavy silence that made my stomach tighten. I found them all gathered in the living room. My father Marcus sat in his leather recliner, still in his pajamas but with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold. Calculating. My mother Catherine stood behind him, her arms crossed, wearing the red silk robe I'd given her last year. My sister Victoria was perched on the edge of the couch, her phone in her hands, looking uncomfortable but not surprised. And my brother Dylan leaned against the fireplace mantel, avoiding my eyes entirely. "Natalie," my father said, his voice flat. "We need to talk." I set the coffee cake down on the side table, suddenly feeling overdressed in my festive green sweater. "Okay, sure. Merry Christmas to you too, Dad." I tried to keep my tone light, but something was very wrong here. "Sit down," my mother commanded. "I'd rather stand, thanks. What's going on?" Marcus cleared his throat and pulled out a manila folder from beside his chair. "We've made a decision as a family. You're no longer welcome in this house." The words hit me like ice water. "What?" "You heard him," Catherine said, her voice sharp. "We're done enabling your behavior. You're 29 years old, Natalie. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet instead of constantly depending on us." I stared at them, my brain struggling to process what I was hearing. "Depending on you? I haven't asked you for anything in years. I have my own apartment, my own job, my own life. What are you talking about?" Victoria finally spoke up, still staring at her phone. "Come on, Nat. The car payments, the insurance, the student loans. Mom and Dad have been covering your bills for years." "That's not true." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "I pay my own bills. I've been financially independent since I graduated nursing school." "Really?" Marcus opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "Because according to our records, we've been supplementing your income to the tune of about $800 a month for the past 4 years. He handed me the papers, and I scanned them with growing confusion and horror. Bank statements, payment confirmations, transaction records. All showing money flowing from my parents, accounts to various bills and services. Car insurance in my name, student loan payments, even rent payments to my landlord." "I don't understand," I whispered. "I never asked for any of this. I thought I was paying these myself." "We set up the payments automatically," Catherine explained, her tone suggesting I should be grateful. "We didn't want you to struggle, so we just took care of things behind the scenes. But now we realize we've created a dependent instead of teaching you responsibility. My hands shook as I held the papers. You've been paying my bills without telling me? We were helping you, Dylan said from his spot by the fireplace. And this is how you repay us? By acting like we owe you something? Acting like you owe me? I was starting to find my voice again. I had no idea you were doing any of this. I've been putting money into savings every month, thinking I was covering my own expenses. If I'd known you were paying these bills, I would have taken over the payments myself years ago. Sure you would have, Victoria said with a laugh. You've always been the family charity case, Nat, always needing someone to bail you out. The words stung because they were so completely unfair. I'd worked full-time through nursing school, graduated with honors, and had been working at Cedar Valley Medical Center for 3 years. I picked up extra shifts, worked holidays, and had never once asked my family for financial help. This is insane, I said, my voice getting stronger. If you wanted me to take over these payments, why didn't you just tell me? Why are you making it sound like I'm some kind of freeloader? Marcus stood up, his face reddening. Because you have no gratitude, Natalie. No appreciation for what we've done for you. We've been supporting you for years, and instead of thanking us, you question us. You argue with us. You make us feel like we're not good enough. When have I ever done that? Last month, when you criticized our decision to retire early, Catherine said. You acted like we were being irresponsible with our money. I remembered that conversation. My parents had announced they were both retiring at 58 and 56, despite having minimal savings. I gently suggested they might want to work a few more years to build up their retirement fund. I'd been worried about them, not judgmental. I was concerned about your financial security, I said. I wasn't criticizing you. And that's exactly the problem, Marcus said. You think you know better than we do. You think you're smarter than us. Well, congratulations, Natalie. Now you can put that superior attitude to work supporting yourself completely. He walked over to the front closet and pulled out 3 black garbage bags. My stomach dropped. We've packed your things, he said, setting the bags down in front of me. Your clothes, your books, whatever personal items were still in your old room. You have 30 minutes to load them in your car and leave. I stared at the garbage bags, feeling like I was in some kind of nightmare. You're kicking me out? On Christmas morning? We're setting you free, Catherine said. Free to be the independent adult you claim to be. Victoria was still on her phone, but I could see her smirking. Dylan had moved to the window and was deliberately not looking at me. The pile of presents I'd brought sat unopened on the side table next to my coffee cake, looking absurd and pathetic. What about Christmas dinner? I asked, grasping for something normal to hold on to. What about the plans we made? Plans change, Marcus said. We're having a smaller gathering this year. Just immediate family. The words hit me like a physical blow. Just immediate family. After 29 years, I was apparently no longer immediate family. I picked up one of the garbage bags and felt the weight of my childhood stuffed animals, my high school yearbooks, the framed photos from my nursing school graduation. Everything that connected me to this house, to these people, reduced to trash bags. I need to understand something, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Are you saying that because you chose to pay some of my bills without telling me I'm no longer your daughter? We're saying that because you've shown no appreciation for our sacrifices, and because you continue to act entitled and ungrateful, we think it's best if you learn to manage without our support, Catherine said. Maybe this will teach you some humility. I looked around the room at the faces of the people who had raised me. Marcus with his arms crossed, looking like a CEO, delivering bad news to a failing employee. Catherine with her mouth set in a thin line, like she was doing something distasteful but necessary. Victoria still absorbed in her phone, treating this like it was just another boring family conversation. Dylan staring out the window like he wished he could disappear. Okay, I said quietly. I'll go. I picked up 2 of the garbage bags and headed for the front door. Nobody moved to help me. Nobody said anything. I made 2 more trips to carry out the bags and my presents, my footsteps echoing in the silent house.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
On my final trip, I paused in the doorway. Just so we're clear, I said, When I walk out this door, that's it? No more family dinners? No more holidays? No more relationship? Marcus nodded. That's your choice to make, Natalie. If you want to come back, you know what you need to do. Which is what exactly? Grow up. Learn some gratitude. Stop acting like the world owes you something. I stood there for a moment, looking at the 4 people who had just erased me from their lives over a conversation I didn't even understand. Then I walked out the door. The cold air hit my face like a slap, and I realized I was crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears that immediately froze on my cheeks. I loaded the garbage bags into my Honda Civic, my hands shaking from cold and shock. The coffee cake sat on the passenger seat next to me, looking ridiculous and sad. I sat in my car for a few minutes, engine running, staring at the house where I'd grown up. The Christmas lights looked different now, less welcoming, more like a performance for the neighbors. Through the front window, I could see my family moving around the living room, probably cleaning up from their dramatic intervention, life going on without me like I'd never existed. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How's Christmas morning going?" I started to type back something cheerful and normal, then deleted it. I started to type the truth, then deleted that too. Finally, I just wrote, "Can I come over? I'll explain when I get there." Her response came immediately. "Always. I'll put on coffee." As I drove through the empty Christmas morning streets toward Zoe's apartment, my mind kept replaying the conversation, trying to find the moment where everything went wrong. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this hadn't been a spontaneous decision. The manila folder, the packed bags, the coordinated talking points from Victoria and Dylan. This had been planned. They had all agreed in advance to cut me out of their lives. But why? What had I done that was so terrible? I thought about the bills they'd been paying without my knowledge. Why hadn't they just told me? Why set up a system where they were supporting me secretly, then use it as ammunition against me later? By the time I reached Zoe's building in the Pearl District, a terrible suspicion was forming in my mind. I carried one of the garbage bags up to her apartment, leaving the rest in the car for now. Zoe took one look at my face and wrapped me in a hug without asking any questions. She led me to her couch, brought me coffee and tissues, and waited while I told her everything that had happened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Nat, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Have you ever actually seen these bills they claim they were paying?" I thought about it. No. I mean, I get statements for my car insurance and student loans, but they're all set up for automatic payment. I never really looked at where the money was coming from. "And your rent?" "I have it set up as an automatic transfer from my checking account on the 1st of every month." Zoe reached for her laptop. "Can you log into your bank account?" I gave her a strange look but pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Together we scrolled through months of transaction history. There was my rent payment, going out like clockwork on the 1st of every month. My car insurance, my student loan payments, my credit card bills, all being paid from my own accounts. "Nat," Zoe said softly, "I think you need to look at this more carefully." We spent the next hour going through my financial records. Every bill my parents claimed they were paying, I had been paying myself. The bank statements Marcus had shown me must have been fabricated or doctored somehow. "They lied," I said, staring at my phone screen. "They completely lied. I've been financially independent this whole time." "But why would they do that?" Zoe asked. I thought about it, feeling sick to my stomach. I think they wanted an excuse to get rid of me. And they needed me to believe I deserved it. The rest of Christmas Day passed in a blur of confusion and hurt. Zoe made us a simple dinner, and we watched old movies while I tried to process what had happened. But as the day wore on, the hurt was slowly being replaced by something else. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating kind that settles in your chest and starts making plans. That evening, I called my supervisor at the medical center and asked if I could pick up extra shifts over the holidays. Then I called Kevin Walsh, an attorney I'd met through work who specialized in real estate law. "Kevin, it's Natalie Brennan. I know it's Christmas, but I have a hypothetical question for you." "Sure, what's up?" "If someone wanted to buy a house that was currently owned by someone else, what would that process look like?" There was a pause. Are you talking about buying a house that's for sale? I'm talking about buying the mortgage on a house that's not for sale. Ah. Kevin's voice became more interested. Well, that's more complicated, but it's definitely possible. Are we talking about a situation where the current owners are behind on their payments? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Natalie, what's going on? I looked out Zoe's window at the Portland skyline, lights twinkling in the Christmas evening. My family just taught me a very important lesson about loyalty and gratitude. I think it's time I returned the favor. The next morning, I woke up on Zoe's couch with a crick in my neck and a determination I hadn't felt in years. The coffee was already brewing, and Zoe had left a note saying she'd gone for her morning run and would be back with bagels. I appreciated the space to think. I showered, borrowed some of Zoe's clothes, and sat down at her kitchen table with my laptop and a legal pad. If I was going to do this, I needed to be smart about it. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. First, I pulled up the county assessor's website and searched for my parents' address on Maple Ridge. The property information loaded slowly, but when it did, I felt my first surge of satisfaction. The house was worth approximately $420,000. They'd bought it in 1987 for $68,000. They still owed roughly $180,000 on their current mortgage. Next, I searched for their mortgage information through the public records. Pacific Northwest Credit Union held the loan, with monthly payments of about $1,500. The mortgage had been refinanced twice, most recently 3 years ago, when they'd pulled out equity to renovate the kitchen. I made notes, drawing diagrams, calculating numbers. My nursing salary was decent, around $78,000 a year, but I'd been living well below my means for years. While my parents thought I was struggling financially, I'd actually been saving aggressively. Between my savings account, my 401k, and some conservative investments I'd made, I had built up about $140,000 in liquid assets. Not enough to buy their house outright, but potentially enough to buy their debt. I called Kevin Walsh again. This time he answered on the first ring. Natalie, I was hoping you'd call back. I did some thinking about our conversation yesterday. Good, because I need to understand how mortgage acquisition actually works. Okay, first question. Do you know if your parents are current on their payments? I opened my laptop and navigated to a different website. Give me a minute to check. You can check that online? I work in healthcare. I know how to research public records. I found what I was looking for in the foreclosure filings database. Kevin, they're 4 months behind on their mortgage payments. There was a long pause. 4 months? According to this, they missed October, November, December, and January's payment is due next week. Natalie, that puts them in serious default territory. The bank can start foreclosure proceedings after 90 days. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. So if someone wanted to buy their mortgage from the bank would be motivated to sell. Very motivated. Banks don't want to foreclose if they can avoid it. It's expensive and time-consuming. If someone came along offering to buy the debt at a reasonable price, they'd probably jump at it. What would be considered a reasonable price? For a debt that's 4 months behind? Probably 60 to 70 cents on the dollar. So if they owe $180,000, you might be able to buy it for around $120,000 to $130,000. I did the math quickly. And then I would own their mortgage? You'd own their debt, you'd become their lender, they'd owe you the money instead of owing the bank. And if they couldn't pay, then you could foreclose. Just like any other lender. I thanked Kevin and hung up, my mind racing. This was actually possible. Difficult, but possible. The next step was understanding why my parents were behind on their payments. Yesterday, they'd acted like they were in control of their finances, confidently cutting me off and lecturing me about independence. But people who are current on their bills don't usually kick their children out of the family with such dramatic flair. People who are desperate do. I spent the morning researching my parents' business, Brennan and Associates. It was a small accounting firm that Marcus had started 15 years ago, with Catherine joining as office manager about 10 years back. They handled taxes and bookkeeping for local small businesses and individuals. What I found in the business filings was illuminating. The company had been struggling for the past 2 years. Several negative reviews online mentioned missed deadlines, billing errors, and poor communication. Their client list, based on what I could piece together from public information, had shrunk significantly. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. A notice in the legal section of the Portland Business Journal from 6 months ago. Brennan and Associates was being sued by a former client for malpractice. The client alleged that Marcus had made significant errors in their corporate tax filings that resulted in a $50,000 penalty from the IRS. I called my cousin Riley, who worked in banking and might have more insight into the local business community. "Riley, it's Natalie. I have a weird question for you." "Hey cousin." "Weird how?" "Have you heard anything about my dad's accounting firm? Any rumors or industry talk?" Riley was quiet for a moment. "Nat, is everything okay? You sound strange." "Just humor me. Have you heard anything?" "Well, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but there have been some whispers. Word is that Brennan and Associates lost their biggest client last year, and there's talk about some kind of lawsuit." "Why are you asking?" "Just curious." "Thanks, Riley." I hung up and continued digging. The more I learned, the clearer the picture became. My parents' business was failing. They were behind on their mortgage. They were probably facing significant legal expenses from the malpractice suit, and their solution had been to kick me out of the family while falsely claiming they'd been supporting me financially. It was starting to make sense in a twisted way. They needed a scapegoat for their problems, and they needed to cut all unnecessary expenses. By painting me as an ungrateful dependent, they could justify cutting me off while making themselves look like the victims of my selfishness. Zoe returned with bagels and found me surrounded by papers and printouts, furiously scribbling notes. "You look like you're planning to overthrow a small government," she said, setting down the bag of food. "Something like that." I looked up at her. "Zoe, my parents are in serious financial trouble. Their business is failing, they're behind on their mortgage, and they're being sued for malpractice. And they kicked you out because they needed someone to blame for their problems, and they couldn't afford to keep up the pretense of helping me financially anymore. Except they weren't actually helping me financially. They were just lying about it." Zoe sat down across from me, her expression serious. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about buying their mortgage from the bank." "Jesus, Nat, are you serious?" "Dead serious. They want to teach me about independence and gratitude. Fine. Let me show them what independence really looks like." That afternoon, I drove to Pacific Northwest Credit Union and asked to speak with someone about distressed asset acquisition. The loan officer, a woman named Patricia Kim, looked surprised but professional. "Are you looking to purchase rental properties?" she asked. "Something like that. I'm interested in acquiring a specific mortgage that's currently in default." Patricia's eyebrows went up. "That's unusual for an individual investor. Most distressed debt sales go to companies that specialize in that area." "I understand it's unusual, but I have the capital, and I'm very motivated." "Which property are you interested in?" I gave her my parents' address. Patricia pulled up the file on her computer, and I watched her expression change as she read. "This is a difficult situation," she said carefully. "The borrowers have been clients of ours for over 15 years, but they've fallen significantly behind on payments. We've been working with them to try to find a solution, but they haven't been responsive to our outreach efforts." "What kind of outreach?" "Phone calls, letters, requests to meet and discuss modification options. They seem to be avoiding contact with us entirely." I thought about my parents' behavior yesterday. The cold confidence, the prepared speeches, the manila folder, full of fake documents. They'd been acting like people who had nothing to lose, because they probably felt like they had nothing to lose. If I were to make an offer on this debt, what would that process look like? Patricia explained the process, which was more complex than I'd expected but not impossible. I would need to submit a formal offer, provide proof of funds, and go through a due diligence period. The bank would need to approve the sale, which could take anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. "Can I ask why you're interested in this particular property?" Patricia asked. I met her eyes. Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing that the situation is resolved properly. That evening, I had dinner with Zoe and told her everything I'd learned. She listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just letting me talk through my plan. "So you're really going to do this?" she said when I finished. "I'm really going to do this." "And then what? You foreclose on your parents' house and they become homeless?" I'd been thinking about this all day. "I don't know yet. That's going to depend on them." "Nat, you could destroy their lives. They tried to destroy mine yesterday. They kicked me out of their family based on lies, humiliated me, and made me feel like I was worthless. And now I find out they're in financial trouble and decided to make me the scapegoat for their problems." Zoe was quiet for a moment. "I get that you're angry. I'd be furious too. But this is a really big step. Once you do this, you can't undo it." "Good. I'm tired of being the one who's always expected to be understanding and forgiving, while everyone else gets to be selfish and cruel. What if they apologize? What if they try to make things right? I thought about this. Then we'll see how sincere they are." The next morning, I went to my bank and started the process of liquidating some of my investments. I needed $130,000 in cash to make a competitive offer on my parents' debt. It would leave me with very little in savings, but I'd still have my job and my 401k. And I'd have something more valuable than money: leverage. While I waited for the funds to become available, I continued my research. I found out more about the malpractice lawsuit, which was being pursued aggressively by a former client who alleged that Marcus's errors had cost their business significantly. I found evidence that Catherine had been trying to keep the business afloat by taking on clients they weren't qualified to serve, leading to more complaints and potential legal issues. I also discovered that Victoria had recently graduated from college with a degree in marketing, and Dylan was in his final year of a computer science program. Both of them were probably depending on my parents for financial support, which explained why they'd been so quick to participate in kicking me out. They needed to preserve their own positions in the family hierarchy. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after Christmas, I submitted my formal offer to Pacific Northwest Credit Union: $125,000 for the full mortgage debt on my parents' property. Patricia Kim called me that afternoon to confirm receipt of the offer and told me that the bank would have a decision within 2 weeks. That same day, I drove past my parents' house. There were no cars in the driveway, but I could see lights on inside. The Christmas decorations were still up, looking somehow sad and defiant in the gray January afternoon. I didn't stop, just drove slowly past, wondering what conversations were happening inside that house. Whether they were talking about their financial problems, whether they were regretting their decision to cut me off, whether they even thought about me at all. I spent the weekend working extra shifts at the medical center, partly because I needed the money and partly because I needed the distraction. My colleagues noticed I was quieter than usual, but I wasn't ready to explain what was happening. How do you tell people that you're in the process of buying your parents' debt so you can foreclose on their house? On Monday, Kevin Walsh called with an update. "Natalie, I've been doing some research on your situation, and I need to make sure you understand what you're getting into." "I'm listening." "If the bank accepts your offer and you become the holder of this debt, you'll have significant legal obligations. You'll need to follow all the proper procedures for debt collection and a potential foreclosure. You can't just decide to be vindictive or arbitrary in how you handle this." "I understand." "Do you? Because if you don't follow the proper legal procedures, your parents could sue you and potentially win. You need to be prepared to act like a legitimate lender, not like an angry daughter." His words stung a little, but I knew he was right. "What does that mean practically?" "It means you'll need to send proper notices, follow state foreclosure laws, and give them opportunities to cure the default or negotiate payment arrangements. You can't just show up at their door and tell them they're evicted." "How long does the whole process typically take?" "If they don't respond to your collection efforts?" "In Oregon, usually about 4 to 6 months from the time you start formal proceedings." 4 to 6 months. That felt like forever, and no time at all. Long enough for my parents to potentially come to their senses and reach out to me. Long enough for them to try to fix their financial situation. But also long enough for me to prepare for whatever came next. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last normal conversation I'd had with my parents, the week before Christmas. Marcus had called to confirm that I was coming for Christmas morning, and we talked about the weather and my work schedule. Catherine had gotten on the phone to ask if I could bring coffee cake because she knew I made it better than she did. The conversation had been warm and normal and completely unremarkable. Had they already been planning to kick me out then? Had the warmth in their voices been fake? Or had something happened in that final week that made them decide I needed to be eliminated from their lives? I thought about Victoria and Dylan, how they'd participated so easily in my exile. Victoria with her smirking and phone scrolling, Dylan with his refusal to even look at me. Had they encouraged our parents to get rid of me? Had they seen me as competition for family resources? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not the hot, destructive kind of anger, but the cold, focused kind that makes you very careful and very determined. They had taught me that family loyalty was conditional, that love could be withdrawn without warning, that I was disposable when it became convenient. Fine, I could learn those lessons too. On Wednesday, Patricia Kim called with news. Natalie, the bank has accepted your offer. We're prepared to move forward with the debt transfer. I felt my heart speed up. What happens next? We'll need to finalize the paperwork and transfer the funds. Once that's complete, you'll officially own the debt. At that point, you'll be responsible for collecting the payments or proceeding with foreclosure if the borrowers remain in default. How long will the paperwork take? We should be able to complete everything by the end of next week. Are you ready to proceed? I thought about my parents, probably sitting in their house right now, unaware that their financial fate was about to be decided by the daughter they'd thrown away like garbage. Yes, I said, I'm ready to proceed. The paperwork was finalized on a rainy Thursday afternoon in February. I sat in Patricia Kim's office at Pacific Northwest Credit Union, signing document after document, my hand steady despite the magnitude of what I was doing. When she handed me the final folder containing all the loan documents and payment history, I felt like I was holding my parents' entire future in my hands. Congratulations, Patricia said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely sure congratulations were appropriate. You're now the official holder of this mortgage debt. Here's everything you need to know about the account status, payment history, and your legal options moving forward. I drove home to my apartment in the Pearl District, having finally moved out of Zoe's place the week before. The one-bedroom unit wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I'd furnished it carefully with pieces that felt like the beginning of a new life. I spread the mortgage documents across my kitchen table and read through everything methodically. My parents owed $178,432. They were now 5 months behind on payments. According to Oregon foreclosure law, I had the right to begin formal proceedings immediately, but Kevin Walsh had advised me to follow proper collection procedures first. I needed to send official notices, provide opportunities for payment arrangements, and document everything carefully. I opened my laptop and began drafting the first letter. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, I wrote, then stopped. It felt strange addressing my parents so formally, but this was business now, not family. I started over. Dear Marcus and Catherine Brennan, this letter serves as official notice that your mortgage debt has been transferred from Pacific Northwest Credit Union to Natalie Brennan, effective February 18th. Your current outstanding balance is $178,432, and your account is currently 153 days past due. I continued writing, outlining their options for bringing the account current, setting up payment arrangements, or contacting me to discuss alternatives. I kept the tone professional and neutral, following the template Kevin had provided. At the bottom, I signed it simply N. Brennan, account holder, and included my contact information. The next morning, I drove to the post office and sent the letter via certified mail to ensure they would receive it, and I would have proof of delivery. As I watched the postal workers stamp the envelope, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and nervousness. My parents would probably receive this letter tomorrow. Their reaction was going to tell me everything I needed to know about who they really were. I went to work that day and threw myself into my patients' care with unusual intensity. Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery, commented that I seemed different somehow. More focused, she said. Like you've got something important on your mind. Just trying to stay organized, I told her, helping her with her physical therapy exercises. Organization is good, Mija. But don't forget to take care of your heart too. Her words stayed with me through the rest of my shift. Was I taking care of my heart? Or was I hardening it beyond repair? The certified mail receipt came back signed 3 days later. Catherine's signature, shaky and uncertain. They knew now. They knew their daughter owned their debt, held their home in her hands, could decide their financial future with a phone call or a legal filing. I waited for them to contact me. I imagined Marcus swallowing his pride and calling, maybe starting with an awkward attempt at reconciliation before getting to the business at hand. I pictured Catherine sending a carefully crafted email, trying to navigate between acknowledging her mistake and maintaining some dignity. I even thought Victoria or Dylan might reach out, playing mediator in a situation that had spiraled beyond their understanding. But my phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no emails, nothing. After a week, I sent the second notice, this one more urgent in tone but still professional. This is your second notice regarding your mortgage debt, which is now 160 days past due. Failure to respond to this notice within 14 days may result in the initiation of foreclosure proceedings. Again, I sent it certified mail. Again, I received the signed receipt, this time with Marcus's signature, bold and angry-looking even on the small return card. Still, no contact from them. I began to realize that their silence was intentional. They weren't ignoring me because they were embarrassed or didn't know how to respond. They were ignoring me because they believed I wouldn't actually follow through. They thought this was an empty threat, a dramatic gesture from their discarded daughter who would eventually come crawling back, begging for forgiveness and family reconciliation. They had fundamentally misunderstood who I had become. On a Friday evening in early March, I was having dinner with Zoe at a small Italian restaurant downtown when she brought up the subject I'd been avoiding. It's been 2 weeks since your second notice. Have they contacted you at all? I shook my head, twirling pasta around my fork without much appetite. Complete silence. What are you going to do? I'm going to send the final notice. And then I'm going to begin foreclosure proceedings. Zoe set down her wine glass and leaned forward. Nat, are you sure about this? Once you start the legal process, it becomes very real, very quickly. It's already real. They made it real when they kicked me out of their family and lied about why. But foreclosing on their house, making them homeless, that's not just getting even. That's devastating their entire lives. I looked out the restaurant window at the Portland Street scene, people hurrying past in the evening drizzle, everyone focused on their own destinations and problems. Do you think they considered devastating my life when they threw my belongings in garbage bags and told me I was no longer their daughter? That's different, and you know it. You have your career, your apartment, your independence. They're older, their business is failing, they're facing a lawsuit. If they lose their house, they might not recover from that. Then maybe they should have thought about that before they decided to treat me like I was disposable. Zoe was quiet for a moment, studying my face. You're really going to do this? I'm really going to do this. And if they come begging? If they apologize and admit they were wrong? I considered this question, which I'd been asking myself for weeks. Then we'll see how sincere they are and what they're willing to do to make things right. What would that look like? I don't know yet, but it would have to be more than just words. The final notice went out on Monday morning. This one was stark and uncompromising. This is your final notice before legal action. You have 10 days to contact the account holder to arrange payment, or your mortgage debt will be referred for foreclosure proceedings. I hand-delivered this one, driving to Maple Ridge on a gray March afternoon and walking up to the front door of my childhood home. I could see lights on inside and a car in the driveway, so I knew someone was home, but I didn't knock. I simply left the envelope in the mailbox and walked away. As I drove home, I found myself looking at the neighborhood with different eyes. The carefully maintained lawns, the matching mailboxes, the subtle competition of home improvements and holiday decorations. It was the kind of place where people valued appearances and respectability above almost everything else. The kind of place where being foreclosed upon would be seen as a moral failing, not just a financial one. My parents had built their identity around being successful, stable, respectable members of this community. Marcus with his small business owner status, Catherine with her involvement in church and neighborhood activities, both of them proud of their well-maintained home and their ability to support their children through college. Losing their house wouldn't just be a financial catastrophe for them, it would be a complete destruction of their carefully constructed image. The 10 days passed without any communication from them. On the 11th day, I called Kevin Walsh. "I'm ready to begin foreclosure proceedings. Are you absolutely certain? Once I file these papers, this becomes a matter of public record. There will be newspaper notices, court filings, official documentation. Everyone in their community will know what's happening. I'm certain. Natalie, I have to ask you one more time. Is there any part of you that wants to give them another chance? Any scenario where you could see working this out without going through foreclosure?" I thought about Christmas morning, about the garbage bags and the lies and the cold dismissal. I thought about their continued silence, their apparent belief that I was bluffing, their complete lack of acknowledgement that they had done anything wrong. Kevin, if they had called me even once in the past 6 weeks, if they had sent even a single email acknowledging what happened and asking to talk, I might have been willing to work something out. But they haven't. They've chosen to ignore this situation completely, which tells me they still don't take me seriously and they still don't respect me as an adult. All right then. I'll prepare the paperwork and file it with the court this week. Once it's filed, the foreclosure process typically takes about 4 months, assuming they don't respond or contest it. And if they do respond or contest it, quote, then it gets more complicated and could take longer. But based on the documentation you have and the fact that they're clearly in default, they don't have much legal ground to stand on. That evening, I sat in my apartment looking through old photo albums I'd rescued from the garbage bags my parents had packed. Pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, graduations, holidays. All the moments that had seemed important at the time. All the evidence of what I'd thought was a loving, stable family. In one photo, I was about 12 years old, standing between Marcus and Catherine at my middle school science fair. I was holding a ribbon for second place, and both my parents were beaming with pride. Marcus had his arm around my shoulders, and Catherine was adjusting my hair with the gentle touch of a loving mother. What had happened to those people? Had they ever really existed, or had I just imagined the love and pride I'd seen in their faces? I closed the album and put it away. Whatever those people had been, they were gone now. The people who had replaced them were strangers who had used me and discarded me when it became convenient. The foreclosure papers were filed on Thursday. Kevin called me that afternoon to confirm that everything had been submitted properly, and that the initial notices would be published in the Portland Business Journal and posted at the courthouse. "Your parents will receive official notification by the end of next week," he said. "After that, they'll have 30 days to respond if they want to contest the foreclosure. What are the chances they'll contest it? Given the strength of the documentation and the fact that they're clearly in default, probably low. But people in desperate situations sometimes do desperate things." That weekend, I decided to take a break from thinking about foreclosure and legal proceedings. I drove out to the coast with Zoe, and we spent Saturday walking on the beach and talking about anything except my family situation. It was the first time in months that I'd felt truly relaxed. On Sunday evening, as we drove back into Portland, Zoe asked me what I was planning to do with my parents' house if the foreclosure went through successfully. I haven't decided. I could sell it and recoup my investment, plus probably make a decent profit given the real estate market. Or I could keep it as a rental property. The income would be nice, and it's in a good neighborhood. Would you ever consider moving back into it yourself? I thought about this. The idea of living in my childhood home as an adult, of claiming the space that my parents had tried to deny me, had a certain poetic appeal. But it also felt potentially unhealthy, like I'd be trapping myself in the past instead of building toward the future. I don't think so. Too much history in that house, and not all of it good. What if your parents tried to buy it back from you? What if they got their financial situation figured out and made you an offer? That would depend on a lot of factors. Whether they acknowledged what they did wrong, whether they made a genuine attempt to repair our relationship, what their offer looked like. You'd consider it? I'd consider it. But it would have to be on my terms, not theirs. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call. Not from my parents, but from my cousin Riley. Nat, I heard about the foreclosure. It's all over town. My stomach tightened. What are you hearing? People are talking. Your parents have been telling people that you've lost your mind, that you're trying to destroy the family out of spite. And what are people saying in response? It's mixed. Some people are buying their version of events, but others are asking questions about why you would do something so drastic unless something really serious had happened. What kind of questions? Like why you're not living at home anymore, why you weren't at Christmas dinner, why your parents seem so desperate to paint you as unstable instead of just admitting they made some financial mistakes. This was interesting. My parents' strategy of portraying me as vengeful and irrational was backfiring with at least some people. Their community knew them well enough to recognize desperation when they saw it. Riley, can I ask you something? Sure. Have you heard anything about their business? About the lawsuit or their financial situation? Word is the malpractice suit is going to trial in the fall, and the client is asking for damages that could bankrupt them. And apparently they haven't been paying some of their business suppliers on time. How bad is it? Bad enough that people are wondering if they're going to have to shut down entirely. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table thinking about this new information. My parents were facing potential financial ruin from multiple directions. The malpractice lawsuit, the failing business, the mortgage default. Losing their house might be the least of their problems. But instead of reaching out to family for support, instead of being honest about their situation and asking for help, they had chosen to create an enemy. They had decided that having someone to blame was more important than actually solving their problems. That afternoon, I received a call that I'd been half expecting and half dreading. Natalie, this is Victoria. I felt my pulse quicken. After almost 3 months of silence from my family, hearing my sister's voice was jarring. Victoria, this is unexpected. We need to talk. Do we? You know we do. This foreclosure thing has gone far enough. You're tearing the family apart. I almost laughed. I'm tearing the family apart? Victoria, you were there on Christmas morning. You participated in kicking me out. You called me the family charity case. That was different. We were all emotional. And things got out of hand. Things got out of hand? You all planned it in advance. You had my belongings packed and ready to go. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Look. Maybe we handled things badly, but this is insane, Nat. You're trying to take away Mom and Dad's house. I'm collecting on a debt that they defaulted on. If they had wanted to keep their house, they should have made their mortgage payments. You know they're having financial problems. Then maybe they should have been honest about that instead of lying about supporting me financially. They were trying to help you. By paying bills, I was already paying myself, and then using imaginary debt as an excuse to cut me out of the family? That's not help, Victoria. That's manipulation. They love you, Nat. They're just proud. And they don't know how to admit they made a mistake. Then maybe it's time they learned how. What do you want? What will it take for you to stop this foreclosure and let us be a family again? I looked out my apartment window at the Portland skyline, thinking about this question I'd been asking myself for weeks. I want them to acknowledge what they did. I want them to admit that they lied about the financial support and that they kicked me out based on false information. I want them to apologize for the things they said and the way they treated me. And then you'll stop the foreclosure? And then we'll talk about what comes next. I'll talk to them. Victoria, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this to hurt them. I'm doing this because they hurt me, and they've shown no remorse or acknowledgement of that fact. If they want to fix this, they need to start by being honest about what happened. I'll talk to them, she repeated, and hung up. 3 days passed without any word from Victoria, and I began to wonder if she'd actually spoken to our parents at all. Maybe she'd thought better of getting involved, or maybe they'd dismissed her concerns the same way they'd dismissed mine for years. I was working a double shift on Wednesday when my phone rang during my lunch break. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer anyway. "Natalie, it's your father." Marcus's voice sounded different, older somehow, less commanding than I remembered. I felt my heart rate spike, but I kept my voice steady. "Hello, Marcus. We need to meet. This situation has gotten out of hand." "Has it? Or has it simply reached a point where you can no longer ignore it?" There was a long pause. "Can we meet somewhere neutral? Maybe that coffee shop on Division Street you used to like?" I was surprised he remembered grind coffee. "When? Tonight? After you get off work?" "I work until 7. 8 o'clock then." I agreed and hung up, my hands trembling slightly. This was the first direct contact I'd had with either of my parents since Christmas morning. Part of me felt a surge of hope that maybe, finally, they were ready to have an honest conversation. But another part of me remained skeptical. People who had shown themselves capable of such calculated cruelty didn't usually transform overnight into reasonable, empathetic human beings. I called Kevin Walsh during my break. "My father wants to meet tonight. Should I be worried about any legal implications? Just be careful what you say. Don't make any promises or commitments without running them by me first. And Natalie? Yes? Record the conversation if you can do it legally. Oregon is a one-party consent state, so you don't need to tell him you're recording as long as you're part of the conversation." I downloaded a recording app on my phone and tested it to make sure it worked properly. If this conversation was going to determine the future of my family relationships, I wanted an accurate record of what was actually said. Grind coffee was nearly empty when I arrived at 8 o'clock. Marcus was already there, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. He looked older than I remembered, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. He was wearing a sweater I'd given him 2 Christmases ago, which felt like either a peace offering or a manipulation tactic. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down across from him. I said I would. I ordered a chai latte from the barista and started the recording app on my phone, placing it face down on the table between us. Marcus had already ordered coffee but wasn't drinking it. "Natalie, I want you to know that what happened on Christmas morning wasn't planned. We were all under a lot of stress, and emotions got high, and things were said that shouldn't have been said." I studied his face, looking for signs of genuine remorse or continued manipulation. That's interesting, because Victoria and Dylan seemed to know exactly what was happening, and you had my belongings packed and ready to go. We thought you might get upset and want to leave, so we prepared for that possibility. You prepared for the possibility that I'd get upset when you falsely accused me of being financially dependent on you and kicked me out of the family. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "The financial situation is complicated." "No, it's not complicated. You told me you'd been paying my bills for years. I showed you bank records proving that I'd been paying my own bills. You lied to me. And then you used that lie to justify cutting me out of your lives. We were trying to help you become more independent. By lying to me about my own financial situation, by giving you motivation to stand on your own." I felt the familiar surge of anger, but I kept my voice calm. "Marcus, I've been standing on my own for years. I have a career, an apartment, savings, investments. I've been financially independent since I graduated from nursing school. The only thing that's changed is that now I know you were lying to me about helping me." He was quiet for a moment, staring at his untouched coffee. "Your mother and I have been having some business difficulties." "I know. I know about the malpractice lawsuit, the declining client base, the fact that you're behind on multiple bills including your mortgage." Marcus looked up sharply. "How do you know about that?" "Because I did my research before I bought your mortgage debt. I wanted to understand what I was getting into. You really did it. You actually bought our mortgage." "I told you I was going to. Did you think I was bluffing?" "I thought you were angry. and making threats you didn't intend to follow through on. Well, you thought wrong. Marcus leaned forward, his expression becoming more desperate. Natalie, you have to understand our position. We're facing financial ruin. The lawsuit could cost us everything, and if we lose the house too, then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to make me your scapegoat. We never meant to scapegoat you. What would you call it then? You lied about supporting me financially, kicked me out of the family, and then told everyone who would listen that I was ungrateful and dependent. What else would you call that? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. We were scared. The business is failing. We're facing this lawsuit. And we didn't know how to handle it. When you questioned our decision to retire early, it felt like you were criticizing us when we were already at our lowest point. So you decided to eliminate the criticism by eliminating me. We thought if we could reduce our expenses and focus on the family members who really needed our support. You mean Victoria and Dylan. They're younger. They still need help getting established in their careers. And I don't? You've always been more self-sufficient. I almost laughed at the irony. So because I was responsible and independent, I got punished for it. And because Victoria and Dylan were still depending on you for support, they got rewarded. That's not how we saw it. How did you see it? Marcus rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. We saw it as making hard choices during a difficult time. Hard choices like lying to me about my own finances? We thought if you believed we'd been helping you, you'd understand why we needed to focus our resources elsewhere. So you admit you lied. Marcus nodded slowly. We exaggerated our financial support to make our position seem more reasonable. You didn't exaggerate, you completely fabricated it. You created fake bank statements showing payments you never made. How do you know they were fake? Because I have the real bank statements showing that I paid all those bills myself. Marcus looked defeated. We're desperate, Natalie. We don't know what else to do. You could start by telling the truth. To me, to Victoria and Dylan, to yourselves. What truth? That you're in serious financial trouble. That you made some bad business decisions. And that you tried to solve your problems by scapegoating your most financially stable child. And then what? What happens after we admit all of that? That depends on what you're willing to do to make things right. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. What do you want? What would it take for you to stop this foreclosure? I had been thinking about this question for weeks, and I finally had an answer. I want a public apology. I want you to acknowledge to everyone you told that I was ungrateful and dependent that you were wrong. I want you to admit that you lied about supporting me financially. And then you'll stop the foreclosure? And then we'll discuss what comes next. What does that mean? It means that stopping the foreclosure and rebuilding our relationship are two separate issues. The foreclosure stops when you make good on your debt obligations. The relationship gets rebuilt when you demonstrate that you understand what you did wrong and that you're committed to treating me with honesty and respect. Marcus looked confused. I don't understand the difference. The difference is that I'm not going to use your financial desperation to force you to pretend to love me. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be because you actually want one, not because I'm holding your house hostage. We do want a relationship with you. Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise. You've had 3 months to reach out to me, to apologize, to try to fix what you broke. Instead, you've ignored me completely until the foreclosure proceedings forced you to acknowledge my existence. We didn't know how to approach you after everything that happened. You could have started with the truth. You could have called me and said, Natalie, we're sorry. We lied to you. We treated you terribly, and we want to make it right. Instead, you've been telling people that I'm mentally unstable and trying to destroy the family. Marcus winced. Who told you that? People talk, Marcus. And when someone starts foreclosure proceedings against their own parents, people want to know why. What are people saying? Some people are buying your version of events. Others are asking harder questions about what kind of parents would drive their daughter to take such drastic action. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were watery. I don't know how to fix this, Natalie. I don't know how to undo the damage we've done. You start by taking responsibility for your actions. All of them. The lies, the manipulation, the cruelty on Christmas morning, the months of silence since then. And you think that will be enough? I think it will be a start. What if it's not enough for you? What if we apologize and admit we were wrong, and you still decide to foreclose on our house? I considered this question carefully. Marcus, I want you to understand something. This foreclosure isn't about revenge. It's about consequences. You made choices that led to your current situation, and one of those choices was to default on your mortgage payments. I didn't cause your financial problems. I just became the person holding the debt when your problems caught up with you. But you could choose to work with us instead of against us. I could, but that would depend on you demonstrating that you're trustworthy business partners. What would that look like? Quote, complete honesty about your financial situation. A realistic plan for addressing your debts and legal issues. Acknowledgement that your financial problems are your responsibility, not mine or anyone else's. Marcus nodded slowly. And what about the family relationship? What would it take for you to forgive us and be our daughter again? I never stopped being your daughter, Marcus. You stopped being my parents when you decided that I was disposable. We never thought of you as disposable. Didn't you? When things got difficult, I was the one you chose to eliminate. When you needed someone to blame for your problems, I was the convenient target. When you wanted to reduce your expenses, I was the relationship you were willing to sacrifice. We thought you were strong enough to handle it. I was strong enough to handle it. But that doesn't make it right. Marcus was crying now, quiet tears running down his cheeks. I don't know how to be the father you need me to be. I don't need you to be anything other than honest with me. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to acknowledge what happened and commit to doing better. What if I can't? What if I try to do better and I still mess it up? Then you mess it up honestly, and we deal with it honestly. But Marcus, I can't have a relationship with someone who lies to me and manipulates me when things get difficult. So if we apologize publicly and admit we were wrong about the financial support, you'll consider working with us on the mortgage? I'll consider it. But I want to be clear about something. Any agreement we make about the mortgage needs to be realistic and sustainable. I'm not going to accept a payment plan that you can't actually afford, just to make myself feel better about the family situation. What would a realistic payment plan look like? That would depend on your actual income and expenses. We'd need to look at your complete financial picture and figure out what you can realistically afford to pay while still meeting your other obligations. And if we can't afford enough to make it work, then we'd have to discuss other options, maybe selling the house and finding something smaller and more affordable. Maybe you moving in with Victoria or Dylan while you get back on your feet. Marcus looked stricken. Leave our home? Marcus, you might lose your home anyway if the malpractice lawsuit goes badly. At least this way you'd have some control over the timing and terms. We built our whole life in that house, raised our children there. I understand that. But houses are just buildings. What matters is the people in them and how they treat each other. Is that what this is about? The way we treated you? It's about accountability, Marcus. You and Catherine made choices that hurt me deeply. And you've shown no remorse or acknowledgement of that hurt. You can't fix a relationship problem by pretending it doesn't exist. What if Catherine won't apologize? What if she refuses to admit we were wrong? Then I guess you'll have to decide what's more important to you, your house or your pride. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, if we do this, if we apologize publicly and admit we lied about the financial support, what guarantee do we have that you won't still foreclose on us? You don't have any guarantee. Just like I don't have any guarantee that your apology will be sincere, or that you won't revert to your old patterns of behavior once you think the crisis has passed. So we're both taking a risk. Yes, but that's what trust requires. Someone has to be willing to take the first step. And you think it should be us. I think the people who caused the problem should be the ones who take responsibility for fixing it. Marcus finished his coffee, which had gone cold during our conversation. I need to talk to Catherine. And Victoria and Dylan. What are you going to tell them? The truth. That we created this situation with our own choices. And now we need to decide whether we want to fix it or lose everything. How long do you need? Give me a week. I'll have an answer for you by next Wednesday. I nodded and stood up to leave. Marcus? Yes. Whatever you decide, make sure it's what you actually want to do. Not what you think you have to do to manipulate me into giving you what you want. I've gotten very good at recognizing the difference. I understand. I hope you do. As I drove home, I felt emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. Marcus had seemed genuinely remorseful, at least about some of his actions. Whether that remorse would translate into real change remained to be seen. But it was the first honest conversation I'd had with either of my parents since before Christmas. The next morning, Victoria called me. Dad told me about your meeting last night. And I think you're asking for too much. A public apology will humiliate them. Victoria, they humiliated me first. They lied about me, to their friends, to the church, to anyone who would listen. They painted me as ungrateful and unstable to justify their own behavior. That's different. How is it different? Because they're our parents. They deserve respect. Respect is earned, Victoria. And parents who lie to their children, manipulate them, and then discard them when it becomes convenient, don't deserve automatic respect just because of their biological relationship to you. You're being vindictive. I'm being honest. There's a difference. What about forgiveness? What about being the bigger person? What about accountability? What about acknowledging that actions have consequences? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Dylan thinks you've lost your mind. Dylan can think whatever he wants, but he participated in what happened on Christmas morning. Just like you did. If he wants to judge my response to that, he's welcome to, but his opinion doesn't carry much weight with me. We're all stressed about this situation. Good. You should be stressed about it. You should all be thinking very carefully about the choices you've made and the relationships you've damaged. So there's nothing we can do to fix this? I told Marcus what it would take to start fixing this. Whether you all decide to do those things is up to you. And if we don't, then in about 3 months you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Victoria hung up without saying goodbye. I wasn't surprised by her reaction, but I was disappointed. I'd hoped that maybe she would be more willing than our parents to acknowledge what had happened and take responsibility for her part in it. The week passed slowly. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts and focusing intensely on my patients' care. But underneath the surface activity, I was constantly aware of the deadline I'd given Marcus, wondering what decision my family would make. On Tuesday evening, the night before my deadline, Catherine called me. Natalie, I think we need to talk. Catherine's voice sounded different than I'd ever heard it before. Smaller, somehow. More uncertain. What do you want to talk about, Catherine? Can you come to the house? Tomorrow morning? There's something I need to show you. I hesitated. Going back to that house felt like walking into a trap, but something in her tone made me curious. What kind of something? Just please come. 10 o'clock. Marcus will be at his office, so it'll just be us. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The next morning, I drove through the familiar streets of Maple Ridge with my stomach in knots. The neighborhood looked the same as always. Perfectly manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, but I felt like an intruder now. I parked in the driveway and walked up to the front door where Catherine was waiting for me. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile. Her hair was grayer, and she'd lost weight in a way that made her clothes hang loose on her frame. When she opened the door, she didn't try to hug me or make small talk. She just stepped aside and let me in. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. The house smelled the same, like lemon polish and Catherine's vanilla candles, but it felt different, smaller, less imposing than it had seemed when I was growing up here. "What did you want to show me?" Catherine led me upstairs to the master bedroom, which surprised me. She opened the closet door and pulled out a large cardboard box from the back corner. "I've been keeping these," she said, setting the box on the bed. I probably shouldn't have, but I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. Inside the box were dozens of cards and letters. Birthday cards I'd made for her as a child. Mother's Day gifts. Thank you notes for Christmas presents. Letters I'd written from summer camp and college. All of them carefully preserved. Organized by year. I don't understand, I said. Keep looking. Underneath the cards and letters were photographs. Pictures of me at every age, from infancy through adulthood. School photos, family vacations, graduations, candid shots of me helping in the kitchen or reading in the backyard. Some of them were photos I'd never seen before, moments Catherine had captured without me knowing. Catherine, why are you showing me this? She sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. Because I need you to know that we loved you, that we've always loved you. Then why did you throw me away? Catherine's face crumpled, and she started crying. Not delicate tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere profound and broken inside her. Because we were scared, she said when she could speak again. Because we were failing at everything, and we didn't know how to ask for help. So you decided to blame me instead. We decided to eliminate what we saw as criticism before it could hurt us more than we were already hurting. I stared at her, trying to process this admission. You kicked me out because you were afraid I'd judge you for your problems? You've always been the responsible one, Natalie. The one who made good choices, who had her life together. When our business started failing and the lawsuit happened, we felt like we were disappointing you. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to cut me out entirely. We thought it would be easier than facing your disappointment. Catherine, I would never have been disappointed in you for having financial problems. I would have tried to help you. We know that now, but at the time we were so ashamed. We felt like failures as parents, as business owners, as adults. And you were this bright, successful daughter who had everything figured out. I don't have everything figured out. I'm just trying to make good decisions and work hard. That's more than we were doing. Catherine wiped her eyes and reached into the box again, pulling out a folder I hadn't noticed before. There's something else I need to show you. Inside the folder were bank statements, but not the fake ones Marcus had shown me on Christmas morning. These were real statements from their business account, showing months of declining deposits, overdraft fees, and bounced checks. We've been in serious financial trouble for over a year, Catherine said. The malpractice lawsuit is just the final blow. We were already drowning before that happened. Why didn't you tell me? Because we were too proud. And because we knew you'd offer to help. And we didn't want to be the kind of parents who take money from their children. But you were willing to be the kind of parents who lie to their children and abandon them? Catherine flinched. We thought it would be temporary. We thought if we could just get through this rough patch, we could fix things and bring you back into the family. By pretending you'd been supporting me financially? We thought if you believed we'd been helping you, you'd understand why we needed to focus our resources on Victoria and Dylan during our crisis. So you invented a debt I didn't owe to justify cutting me off from a family I'd never asked to leave. When you put it like that, it sounds monstrous. It was monstrous, Catherine. She was crying again, quietly this time. I know it was wrong. I've known it was wrong since the moment we did it. But I didn't know how to undo it. You could have called me. You could have told me the truth. I was too ashamed. We were too ashamed. I sat down in the chair by the window, the same chair where I used to read as a teenager when I needed to escape family drama. The irony wasn't lost on me. Catherine, do you understand what you did to me? Not just the lying and the manipulation, but the abandonment? I think so. No, I don't think you do. You took your daughter, who had never asked you for anything, who had been financially independent for years, who loved you despite your flaws, and you threw her away like garbage because it was easier than being honest about your problems. We never meant for it to feel like that. But that's what it was. You decided that preserving your pride was more important than preserving your relationship with me. Catherine was quiet for a long time, staring at the box of memories on the bed. What can we do to fix this? She finally asked. I told Marcus what it would take to start fixing this. The public apology. The public apology. and acknowledgement that you lied about the financial support. He told me. And I understand why you're asking for that. Do you, quote, you want us to experience the same kind of humiliation we put you through? No, Catherine. I want you to tell the truth. I want the people you lied to about me to know that you lied. It's the same thing. It's not the same thing. Humiliation for its own sake would be cruelty. Telling the truth to correct lies you told is accountability. Catherine picked up one of the photographs from the box, a picture of me at about age 10, grinning and missing 2 front teeth. I remember this day, she said. You'd lost both your front teeth the same week, and you were so self-conscious about smiling. But Marcus told you a joke at dinner, and you forgot to hide your teeth. I remember that too. You were such a happy child. Always laughing, always trying to help with everything. I was happy because I felt loved and secure, because I trusted you. And we destroyed that trust. You did. Catherine set the photograph back in the box. If we do what you're asking, if we apologize publicly and admit we lied, will you stop the foreclosure? I'll consider working out a payment arrangement that you can actually afford. What would that look like? It would depend on your real financial situation. How much income do you actually have coming in each month? Catherine pulled out another folder and showed me their current income and expense statements. The numbers were worse than I'd expected. Between the declining business revenue and the legal fees from the malpractice case, they were barely covering their basic living expenses. You can't afford your current mortgage payment, I said after reviewing the numbers. No, we haven't been able to afford it for months. So even if I agreed to take over the payments where you left off, you'd probably default again within a few months. Probably. Then a payment arrangement isn't going to solve your problem. You need to either dramatically increase your income or dramatically decrease your expenses. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you might need to sell this house regardless of whether I foreclose or not. Catherine looked around the master bedroom, taking in the furniture she'd carefully chosen, the artwork on the walls, the windows that looked out over the backyard where she'd gardened for decades. This is our home, Natalie. We raised you children here. All our memories are here. I understand that. But Catherine, you can't afford to live here anymore. The house payment alone is more than half your monthly income, and that doesn't include utilities, maintenance, insurance, and property taxes. What if we found a way to increase our income? How? Your business is failing, you're facing a major lawsuit, and you're both approaching 60. What miracle income source are you planning to find? Catherine was quiet for several minutes, staring at the financial documents spread across the bed. What if we sold the business? She finally said. Who would buy a failing accounting firm with a pending malpractice lawsuit? Maybe someone would buy it for the client list. Catherine, be realistic. Even if you could sell the business, would it be for enough money to pay off your debts and get current on the mortgage? She shook her head. No, probably not. Then you need to accept that you're going to lose this house one way or another. The only question is whether you lose it through foreclosure, which will destroy your credit and make it harder to find rental housing, or whether you sell it voluntarily and use the proceeds to pay off your debts and start over somewhere more affordable. You're saying we should just give up. I'm saying you should face reality and make the best of a bad situation instead of clinging to something you can't afford and making everything worse. Catherine picked up another photograph, this one of our whole family at Christmas several years ago. We were all smiling, gathered around the tree in the living room downstairs. It looked like the perfect family moment, but I could remember the tension that had existed just outside the frame. Marcus had been stressed about business problems even then, and Victoria had been sulking about something. Only Dylan and I had been genuinely happy. What about the family? Catherine asked. If we sell the house and move somewhere smaller, what happens to family gatherings? Where do Victoria and Dylan come home to? They're adults, Catherine. They'll adapt. Victoria's getting married next year. She was planning to have the reception in our backyard. Then she'll need to make different plans. And Dylan's talking about graduate school. We were hoping to help him with tuition. You can't help him with tuition if you're bankrupt. Catherine set the photograph aside and looked at me directly for the first time since I'd arrived. You really think we should sell the house? I think you should consider all your options realistically, instead of hoping for miracles that aren't going to happen. And if we did sell it, what would happen with the foreclosure? If you sold it before the foreclosure was finalized, you could pay off the debt and avoid having a foreclosure on your credit record. Would you help us with that? Would you work with us to coordinate the timing? I considered this question carefully. If you're serious about selling, and if you follow through on the public apology and acknowledgement of the lies, then yes, I'd be willing to work with you to make sure everything is handled properly. What kind of timeline are we looking at? For the sale? In this market, probably 2 to 4 months if you price it realistically. And for the apology? That needs to happen first. Before I agree to cooperate on anything else. Catherine nodded slowly. I'll talk to Marcus. And Victoria and Dylan. What do you think they'll say? Victoria will resist. She hates the idea of admitting we were wrong, especially publicly. Dylan will probably go along with whatever we decide. And Marcus? Marcus is scared. He's terrified of losing everything and ending up with nothing to show for 30 years of work. He might end up with something more valuable than a house or a business. What's that? His relationship with his daughter. Catherine started crying again, but softer this time. Do you think that's possible? Do you think you could forgive us someday? I don't know, Catherine. I know I want to try, but trust is something that has to be rebuilt slowly. How do we start? You start by telling the truth, all of it. To me, to Victoria and Dylan, to your friends and neighbors. You stop trying to manage other people's perceptions and just be honest about what happened. That's terrifying. I know, but it's the only way forward that doesn't involve more lies and more manipulation. Catherine began putting the photographs and letters back in the box. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really buy our mortgage? Was it just to get revenge on us? I thought about this question, which I'd been asking myself for months. I think initially it was about power. You made me feel powerless on Christmas morning, and I wanted to turn the tables. And now? Now I think it was about forcing a reckoning. You and Marcus have spent your whole lives avoiding difficult conversations and consequences. This situation makes it impossible for you to avoid dealing with your problems. So you're helping us in a twisted way. Maybe, or maybe I'm just tired of being the only person in this family who takes responsibility for their actions. Catherine closed the box and set it aside. I need to ask you one more thing. What? If we do everything you're asking for, if we apologize publicly and sell the house and start over, is there any chance we can be a family again? I looked around the bedroom where I'd run to Catherine when I had nightmares as a child, where she'd helped me get ready for school dances and graduation ceremonies. This room held so many memories of the mother I'd thought she was. I don't know if we can go back to being the family we were, I said finally, but maybe we can build something new, something more honest. I'd like that. So would I. The public apology came 2 weeks later. Marcus and Catherine published a letter in the Portland Business Journal and posted it on their social media accounts. It was brief but direct. They acknowledged that they had falsely claimed to be providing financial support to their daughter, admitted that they had lied about her dependence on them, and apologized for any damage to her reputation their false statements had caused. The response was swift and varied. Some people expressed shock and disappointment in my parents. Others praised them for having the courage to admit their mistakes. A few people reached out to me directly to apologize for believing the lies about my character. Victoria called me the day after the apology was published. Are you happy now? She asked without preamble. I'm not happy that any of this happened, Victoria. I'm relieved that the truth is finally out there. You've humiliated our parents. They humiliated themselves with their actions. The apology just acknowledged what they did. And now everyone knows our business. Everyone already knew your business, Victoria. They just had the wrong version of it. What happens next? That depends on what Marcus and Catherine decide to do about their housing situation. They're really going to sell the house. They can't afford to keep it. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I hate this. I hate that our family is falling apart. Our family fell apart on Christmas morning when you all decided I was disposable. What's happening now is just the practical consequences of that decision. Can't you just forgive us and move on? Forgiveness isn't the same thing as pretending nothing happened, Victoria. Actions have consequences, even when we don't like those consequences. So you're never going to get over this. I'm working on getting over it. But that's different from pretending it didn't happen, or that it doesn't matter. Victoria hung up without saying goodbye, which had become her signature move in our conversations. Marcus called me a few days later to tell me they'd listed the house with a real estate agent. "We priced it to sell quickly," he said. "The agent thinks we'll have an offer within a few weeks." "Good. How are you feeling about it?" "Terrified. Sad. But also kind of relieved." "Relieved?" "We've been carrying this financial stress for so long, and trying to keep up appearances has been exhausting. At least now everyone knows the truth, and we don't have to pretend anymore." "What are you planning to do after the house sells?" "We found a small apartment in Beaverton. It's not much, but it's affordable, and it'll give us time to figure out what comes next." "What about the business?" "We're going to close it. After the malpractice case is settled, we'll probably both need to find other work." "I'm sorry, Marcus." "Don't be sorry. You were right when you said we needed to face reality. We should have done this years ago instead of digging ourselves deeper into debt." The house sold in 3 weeks to a young couple who were excited about the neighborhood and the mature landscaping. Marcus and Catherine used the proceeds to pay off the mortgage debt, settle some of their other creditors, and cover the costs of moving to their apartment. I attended the closing, not as their daughter but as the mortgage holder transferring the lien. It felt surreal to sit across a conference table from my parents while lawyers shuffled papers and discussed property transfers. But it also felt like closure. After the closing, Marcus walked me out to the parking lot. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For forcing us to deal with our problems instead of letting us destroy ourselves slowly." "You're welcome, I think. Natalie, I know we have a long way to go to rebuild your trust. I know the apology in selling the house doesn't undo the damage we did." "No, it doesn't. But it's a start. What can we do next?" "Keep being honest. With me, with yourselves, with Victoria and Dylan. Stop trying to manage everyone's perceptions and just focus on being authentic." "And will you consider spending time with us? Maybe having dinner sometimes?" "I thought about this. Maybe. Let's see how things go." "I understand." 6 months later, I met Catherine and Marcus for dinner at a modest restaurant in Beaverton, near their new apartment. They both looked healthier than they had in years, less stressed and more grounded. The malpractice lawsuit had been settled for less than the plaintiff had originally demanded, and both of them had found part-time work. "How's the apartment?" I asked. "Small but comfortable," Catherine said. "We're actually enjoying not having to maintain a big house." "And the new jobs?" "I'm doing bookkeeping for a nonprofit," Marcus said. "It's not glamorous, but it's honest work and they appreciate my experience." "Catherine's working for a veterinary clinic," Marcus added. "She loves it." "I get to work with animals all day," Catherine said with a smile I hadn't seen in years. "It's the best job I've ever had." We talked about their new life, my work at the medical center, and carefully avoided the topic of Victoria and Dylan, who still weren't speaking to me. As we were finishing dessert, Catherine reached across the table and touched my hand. "I want you to know that we think about what we did every day," she said. "We know we can't undo it, but we're committed to being different people going forward." "I can see that." "Do you think someday you might be able to think of us as your parents again?" I considered the question honestly. "I think someday I might be able to think of you as people I'm related to who I actually like and trust." Marcus laughed. "That might be better than what we had before. It definitely would be more honest." As I drove home that night, I reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. I had lost the family I thought I had, but maybe I was gaining something more valuable. Relationships based on truth instead of obligation. Connection instead of manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How was dinner with the parents?" "Surprisingly good," I typed back. "They're actually becoming people I can respect." "And how are you feeling about everything?" I thought about that as I pulled into my apartment complex. How was I feeling? Not happy, exactly, but not angry anymore either. Settled, maybe. Like I'd finally learned the difference between being loved and being needed. Between family and people who just happen to share your DNA. I'm feeling like I made the right choice, I texted back. All of them. And for the first time in almost a year, I meant it completely. 2 years later, I was promoted to nurse practitioner supervisor at Cedar Valley Medical Center. Marcus and Catherine came to the celebration dinner, along with Zoe and a few other friends. Victoria and Dylan were still absent from my life, but their absence no longer felt like a wound. As I looked around the table at the people who had chosen to be there for me, who had earned their place in my life through consistent kindness and honesty, I realized something important. Sometimes losing your family is the first step to finding out who your real family actually is. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when those people happen to be your parents. The house on Maple Ridge still stands, now home to a different family with their own dreams and problems. Sometimes when I drive past it, I feel a twinge of nostalgia for the life I thought I had there. But mostly, I feel grateful for the life I actually have now. A life built on truth instead of lies, earned instead of assumed, chosen instead of inherited. It turns out that when you stop paying to be tolerated, you discover what it feels like to be genuinely valued. And that discovery changes everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.